During my summer school last year, I met a girl who was just of the same age as me and was participating in the same summer program as I did. Yet, she was a quite different girl. She can hardly leave herself from her wheelchair. She has hydrophobia with her eyes always look aside. And she has the speech impediment. Please take a second and ask yourself, how will you react if you meet a person like her? For me, at the very time when I saw her and talked to her, there was a complex sentiment rising in my heart which is hard to be described. It was like something that crushed together my compassion for her, and to be honest, a feeling unfortunate for myself for just being healthy and normal. Later, I got a chance to talk to her about her life experience and learn about her upbringing story. She was actually a first prize winner for a national speech contest. However, on her way to the awarding ceremony, there was a drunk man crossing her in the street. Seeing her in her wheelchair with her eyeballs squinted, that man yelled at her, "I pity you." Indeed, her life is filled with this kind of pity from others which she doesn't actually need. Because everyone who knows her will recognize that she was strong and powerful, and possibly more powerful than any one of us here today. But I didn't realize that I'm just like that drunk man, holding sympathy for her only based on her physical disability. And this was a shame. Without doubt, the disabled people like her are a section of minority group which are constantly marginalized by us. However, not just by the discrimination such as mocking or contempt, but also by our so-called benevolent pity. This pushes me to consider that whether today's our wild intention of protecting minority groups' rights is actually proper. Admittedly, one of the missions of the United Nations as proclaimed in the UN Charter is to advocate a worldwide protection for the minority groups' rights. Especially in the global context, as a shift from the sovereignty as authority to sovereignty as responsibility, the humanitarian intervention seems to be seen with regard to be necessary and politically correct these days. Just take the LGBT+ example. LGBT+ community, as a matter of fact, is a community which are constantly exposed to discrimination, violence, etc., even on a national basis. Recently, on a moment's my WeChat, there was a fierce advocate for the LGBT+ right in China, urging the Chinese government to guarantee a rightful position for the LGBT+ community in China. Many of my friends who are of different dispositions, different backgrounds, and some of them currently in different countries, all make endless effort in advocating for the equality. This actually reminded me of one of my modern UN experience. Because I have actually designed a committee, the United Nations Human Rights Council, to discuss the topic of the protection and promotion of LGBT+ rights. In the committee, almost every delegate, including China, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, made endless efforts in protecting the LGBT+ rights. Wow, what a great saying! Every delegate has perfect awareness of what the world should do so as to prevent the human rights violations that is based on sexual orientation or gender identity. But to be honest, such situation can be a disaster. Moral relativism and cultural diversity are completely ignored and eliminated. How can we expect the Middle East countries, whose culture and religious capital are extremely important, to accept the Western principle that contradicts with their own fields of power? Or at least, have we got any chance to spare our attention for the homophobic people? Regarding the different backgrounds of religion and culture for different people and countries, which causes them to have different senses toward the minority group, I want us to question ourselves. Is a promotion and export of universal human rights today actually a Western cultural colonialism in the new century? And are we thereby creating a group of minorities while we are protecting the minorities? Above all, how can we rationalize our protection? How do we know if we are offering the appropriate help instead of just the compassion? The war on terrorism is a war that justifies itself by purporting to liberate, to save the Afghan women. Laura Bush even once said that because of U.S. military gains in much of Afghanistan, Afghan women are no longer imprisoned in their home. They can listen to music and teach their daughters without the fear of punishment. Oh, fabulous! White men are saving brown women from brown men. But hey, Hannah, let's chase back to the very beginning of my talk. Would you find any similarities between the act of the U.S. government and that wandering drunk man in the street? Actually, wearing the veil is an almost sign of the oppression towards Afghan women by the terrorists as what we commonly perceive. Although burqa did have a symbolic interpretation that women are separated from the public life, but they are actually a liberating invention that allows women to move out of their segregated living spaces. Needless to say, such clothing is their socially shared standard, religious belief, and moral ideals for the Afghan woman. It is community fashion and community identity. Having choices regarding clothing is great, but we can't turn this into a tyranny of fashion. Protecting the minor groups' rights never means making them a part of majority. Needless to say, many countries like U.S. has turned this kind of compassion and mercy for minor groups in other countries as an excuse for them to intervene so as to achieve their strategic objective, instead of for the primary purpose of helping or preventing the human suffering. And this is like what is happening in our daily life. The advocating for the protection for the minority groups for some people not just only aim for providing them with a brighter future. They are doing this simply because of the pressure from the public opinion, or they're just trying to establish themselves as someone who is kind and caring. It is their strategic objective. Protecting the minor groups' rights is thereby never always politically correct regarding the culture and religious diversity, as well as the self-interest of people and nations during their interventional aid. And that's why when one of the delegates came to me after the conference and asked me whether do you believe there will be a universal guaranteed right for the LGBT plus people, I told him that this is very unlikely, and I don't really hope to see this happen, but we will see. After all, the striving for the safety and decent life for the minority group is necessary, but it should never start from a superior stance. Instead, we really need to break with the language of the alien culture and the ideology to avoid creating a group of minorities while we are protecting the other. Also, before any action, we should always stand in others' shoes to consider that whether they need such help and what kind of help do they need. Or at least, please remember that pity is never protection. Thank you.